वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदनंदन व्रज जन रंजन 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 यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, श्री श्री गौरनिताई की जय, श्री श्री राधा गोविंद हरि की जय, श्री श्री कृष्ण बलराम की जय, गिरिराज गोविंद की जय, समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय, गौर प्रेमानंद। Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chuksurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manubhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Shayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Rahagana Ragunatanvitam Tang Sajivam Sadaitam Sarvadhutam Parijana Shahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Rahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitangscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhu Vevacha Patitanang Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vrindoi Tulsi Debai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Shatavatai Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Adaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Well, welcome to the Bhagavad-gita class. I'm not sure how many of us there'll be. Srila Prabhupada would say anyway, then talk to the four walls. But thank you for coming. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad-gita, Chapter 2, Contents of the Gita Summarized, Text 47. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Kamanya yevarikaraste Mapaleshu kadachana Makarma palaheturpur Mate sango swakarmani. Okay, I'll break it down and please try and repeat. Karmanye vadikaroste Karmanye vadikaroste Ma phaleshu kadachano ma paleshu kadachanam ma karma phalu heturhu ma karma phala heturhu mate sangostva karmani mate sangostva karmani. Anyone want to have a go? You don't have to, it's up to you. You're giving this one a pass? So let's do the word for word. Karmani, in prescribed duties. Please repeat, in prescribed duties. Eva, certainly. So we're repeating. Adhikara, right. Te, of you. Ma, never. Phaleshu, in the fruits. Kadachana, at any time. Ma, never. Karma phala, in the result of the work. Hetuhu, cause. Bhu, become. Ma, never. Te, of you. Sangha, attachment. Astu, there should be. Akarmani, in not doing prescribed duties. All right, so there's a little bit of a tongue twister maybe. Let me get this drone gone. And we'll unpack this. This is an important concept, and it's an important argument. Krishna is dismantling some of Arjuna's word jugglery. So here's the meaning. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. Please repeat. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. Mysterious, huh? Well, let's see what Krishna's going on about. Srila Prabhupada's purport. So, Srila Prabhupada, when he prepared these purports, he always consulted the purports of many other acharyas in our line. Srila Jiva Goswami, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Purport. There are three considerations here: prescribed duties, capricious work, and inaction. What I might do is comment in between because there's a lot of complexity. So Srila Prabhupada is here beginning to comment on the different things that are mentioned in the verse. So prescribed duties, the things that you're supposed to do according to your place in Varnashram. We'll talk about that in a second. Capricious duties, things that are forbidden, things you're not meant to do. And then inaction, not doing things that you should be doing. Three kinds of things that are there. Prescribed duties are activities enjoined in terms of one's acquired modes of material nature. Srila Prabhupada's making mention of Varnashram. We'll talk about that. Varnashram is a system that Krishna created, and it's always present, whether people actually understand how it's supposed to work or not. There will always be these natures of people. There will always be naturally people in goodness that like to teach, people who like to control because they have more passion going on, people who like to wheel and deal, and people who are good for service. There's always these four categories. Even if you took it to the government sector and the private sector and then the labor market, I mean, it's the same basic concepts. So the prescribed duties. Yeah. You've probably benefited from not having to see my ugly mug. Prescribed duties means for each of the roles in the Varnashram system, which is in fact a complete system of organizing society around these different natures, everybody had something called swadharma, duties that go with being in that role. So if you're a brahmana, it's a duty to study and to teach. It's a duty to perform sacrifice and engage others in sacrifice. And it's a duty to give charity and receive charity. These are 6 duties that a brahmana has. If the Brahmin occupies the seat but doesn't do the duties, it starts to create a topsy-turviness in society. So everybody must be careful to do their duties. A Kshatriya is meant to exact tax, wage war, protect the citizens from harm, implement the law. A Vaishya is actually given the facility to make profit by taking Mother Nature's resources, but doing it sustainably, paying all of the tax. In the Vedic system, the only people who had an income that was taxed were the Vaishyas, the mercantile people. Clearly, current business doesn't understand its obligations in this regard. And then the Sudras, whose duty is to serve, but also the 4 Varnas, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, is matched by the 4 ashramas. So a husband has duties, a father has duties, a wife has duties. Everybody's duties in the system to make the whole system work nicely were called swadharma, own duties. So Srila Prabhupada's making a big point about this, and we'll see why. Capricious work means actions without the sanction of authority, so wandering off the prescribed program. And inaction means not performing one's prescribed duties. The Lord advised that Arjuna not be inactive, but that he perform his prescribed duty without being attached to the result. One who is attached to the result of his work is also the cause of the action. Thus he is the enjoyer or sufferer of the result of such action. So he's explaining the law of karma. But let's back up. We're going to come back to the rest of this purport shortly. But how well do you know the Gita? Have you both read the Gita? So you know well enough. Right at the beginning of the Gita takes place within a bigger story called the Mahabharata. And this is where the Pandavas, the rightful heirs of the throne, had been usurped by their cousins, the Kauravas. They'd been kicked out of their kingdom, dispossessed of all their possessions. There'd been various attempts on their life. And finally, it all comes to a big battle called the Battle of Kurukshetra. And when Arjuna looks at the armies on both sides at the beginning of the battle, he loses his nerve. He sees friends, he sees gurus, he sees relatives, and he's starting to wonder if this is actually the path he should take. So I want to go back, because in this particular verse, Krishna is dismantling some of Arjuna's argument. But that's why we should look at his argument and then see how it addresses it. So right at the beginning, let me find, it's like 14 or 15 verses. Okay. So I'm starting at text 27 of the first chapter. When the son of Kunti, Arjuna, saw all these different grades of friends and relatives, he became overwhelmed with compassion and spoke thus. Arjuna said, "My dear Krishna, seeing my friends and relatives present before me in such a fighting spirit, I feel the limbs of my body quivering and my mouth drying up." So overwhelmed by emotion. "My whole body is trembling, my hair is standing on end, and my bow Gandiva is slipping from my hand, and my skin is burning." I mean, this is like a breakdown, complete emotional breakdown. Here he is, one of the most fearsome warriors the world has ever seen. And when he becomes appreciative of the situation he's in, he's just overwhelmed with grief and conflict and all kinds of... You can see literally one of the strongest warriors ever in the bow. He can't even hold his bow. Wow. I am now unable to stand here any longer. I'm forgetting myself and my mind is reeling. I see only causes of misfortune, O Krishna, killer of the Keshi demon. I do not see how any good can come from killing my own kinsman in this battle, nor can I, my dear Krishna, desire any subsequent victory, kingdom, or happiness. So he's starting to build his argument. He's talking about how dreadful the war is going to be, but notice the arguments that are coming. O Govinda, of what avail to us are a kingdom, happiness, or even life itself, when all those for whom we may desire them are now arrayed on this battlefield? O Madhusudana, when teachers, fathers, sons, grandfathers, maternal uncles, fathers-in-law, grandsons, brothers-in-law, and other relatives are ready to give up their lives and properties and are standing before me, why should I wish to kill them, even though they might otherwise kill me? O maintainer of living entities, of all living entities, I am not prepared to fight with them, even in exchange for the 3 worlds, let alone this earth. What pleasure will we derive from killing the sons of Dhritarashtra? It's not yet fully coherent as a logical pushback, but he's talking about the disaster that's going to happen and admitting that his heart is not up for this. Sin will overcome us if we slay such aggressors. Therefore, it is not proper for us to kill the sons of Dhritarashtra and our friends. What should we gain, O Krishna, husband of the goddess of fortune, and how could we be happy by killing our own kinsmen? O Janardhan, although these men, their hearts overtaken by greed, see no fault in killing one's family or quarreling with friends, why should we, who can see the crime in destroying a family, engage in these acts of sin? So now we're going to hear what is called in modern day moral philosophy consequentialism. His basic argument is, it is morally wrong for me to fight because of all these consequences he's about to list. We will also look at why, though it sounds like a very good logical argument, that it has a few embedded assumptions that Krishna will challenge. With the destruction of the dynasty, the eternal family tradition is vanquished, and thus the rest of the family becomes involved in irreligion. In other words, if I fight, all these things start to happen. When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become polluted, and from the degradation of womanhood, O descendant of Vrishni, comes unwanted progeny. So we're going to wipe out all the men. The women aren't going to be protected. They'll be loose and preyed upon. We'll have all of this, unwanted population. So it's quite a strong argument. An increase of unwanted population certainly causes hellish life, both for the family and for those who destroy the family tradition. The ancestors of such corrupt families fall down because the performance for not offering them food and water are entirely stopped. So it's not even that disaster will play out. No one will be performing the pinda for the ancestors. So he's making a big list of why this is such a bad idea based on these consequences. In other words, I shouldn't have to do my duty if my duty results in all of this. Does it make sense? He's arguing why he's off the hook. By the evil deeds of those who destroy the family tradition and thus give rise to unwanted children, all kinds of community projects and family welfare activities are devastated. O Krishna, maintainer of the people, I have heard by disciplic succession that those whose family traditions are destroyed dwell always in hell. Like the ultimate argument. We'll go to hell. So, there's 3 things that Prabhupada has talked about. Doing your duty, approved, but doing it for Krishna. Not doing your duty, avoiding it, not approved. Even if you say, but if I do these things will happen. Notice what Prabhupada said. One who is attached to the result of his work is also the cause of the action. In other words, you think not fighting means that you're not implicated. But actually, to fail to act when it was your duty to act, you are now implicated for all the things that played out because you didn't take action. So he's explaining the intricacies of the law of karma. And again, I'll read what Prabhupada said. One who is attached to the result of his work is also the cause of the action. Thus he is the enjoyer or sufferer of the result. In other words, if you're trying to avoid karmic implication, this is not the path. The path of avoiding karmic implication is not to give up your duty and not to do unauthorized things like other people's duties. That would be capricious work. So the only way, the only option you actually have is to discharge your duties, but with detachment from the results. In other words, leave the result to me. Let go and let God. This is the surrendered position. Now, there's a lot of debate in our society today about swadharma. There are devotees who rightfully say, but Krishna invented varnashram. We should be following varnashram. If you order your life sanely by Krishna's system, it's easier to reach for transcendence. If you violate Krishna's system of how people should be organized, you create chaos and stay implicated. Now, I would observe that most of these, let's call them varnashram traditionalists, seem to focus mostly on women being more restricted than they are. So they're not actually thinking all of the different players. It seems like maybe they caught varnashram and they've co-opted this idea purely to keep women in their place. Does that make sense? They don't seem to be holistically committed. If the sannyasis are living a high lifestyle, no hue and cry. If the woman is giving class, hue and cry. So there's plenty more of the purport to come, we'll do it. But because when I first read it, I wasn't really sure, what is Prabhupada saying? So I did more research for this verse than any class I've ever given. And one of the things I did a search on is, well, when did Prabhupada quote this verse? And what did he say about it? So not just what did he write here, but in the full volume of all the things that he said. And one interesting thing came out. Prabhupada didn't really quote this verse. When it was quoted by others, he would often offer a qualification. In other words, he wasn't happy that if it was quoted by itself and it was missing certain ideas, he made sure those ideas were put in there. And I'll give you those ideas, actually. So let me just get my notes. So there is a wonderful verse in the Vishnu Purana. Varnashrama vata purushena parapama Vishnu aradyate panta nannatatoshakaranam. That's from Vishnu Purana 389. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, is worshipped by the proper execution of prescribed duties in the system of Varna and Ashram. There is no other way to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One must be situated in the institution of the four Varnas and Ashrams. So at least the way it's worded here is, Varnashram is not an option. It is a method of serving and pleasing. In fact, the word is used Nanyat Tatosha Karana. This word santosh, satisfied, and it says Vishnu Aradyate. Lord Vishnu is worshipped in these ways. So literally, by regulating your life, by becoming a parent in the way that Krishna has described good parents are, or by becoming a teacher or a warrior or a business person or a wife, all of it has been mapped We have to live these ways anyway. We have to live. Krishna's saying, if you simply regulate your life according to the principles here, you please me. And actually, a life outside of these principles is unpleasing or displeasing. And it actually creates social chaos. These are all finely tuned, systemic, interactive duties. And if someone doesn't play their part or does somebody else's part, it actually creates havoc, if that makes sense. But this nanyat tatosha karanam is really important. Now, some people misunderstand the relevance of varnashram, because there is a famous conversation in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Prabhupada also writes about it in Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, between someone called Ramananda Roy, a very, very elevated devotee, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, a supreme person, Krishna coming as a devotee. And Lord Chaitanya asked Ramananda Roy, what is the supreme goal of life? What is the ultimate goal of life? And Ramananda Roy actually puts one idea after another, and initially Lord Chaitanya seems to reject them. And this is one of the verses that he rejects. It might be the first one, actually. Varnashrama charavata. No, that is external. Now we should understand, he didn't reject it like we don't need to be concerned with the varnashram. He basically said it's not the answer to the question, the ultimate goal. So it's really important. He didn't reject it per se. He rejected it as the ultimate aim. If we're getting into the business of rejection, one of the other propositions Ramananda Roy made is sarvadharman parityaja, the very last, essentially the ultimate verse in the Bhagavad-gita, sarvadharman parityaja. No. So you could say he even cancelled Lord Krishna's proposed goal in that verse. But he means it's just not the ultimate goal. This needs to be understood. And interestingly, the first verse that he did accept, or the first proposition, stanestita srutigatam tan vagmanobhir. You stay wherever you are in varnashram, but you devote yourself to hearing and chanting. So varnashram's back in, but it's back in because the varnashram is meant to support bhakti, or devotion, and hearing and chanting is the method. So in other words, if it doesn't ultimately end up pleasing Krishna, it's actually a waste of time. And this is the verse now that Prabhupada would often give as a response to Kamanyevadikaraste. Whenever he heard it, it was almost like he was wary about the argument the person might be trying to make if Krishna Bhakti was not a part of it. So this is from the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto. Ata pumpi dvija shreshta varnashrama vibhagasha swanutstitasya dharmasya shangshidhir hari toshanam. So this toshanam idea means satisfaction. O best amongst the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's occupation according to the caste division, in other words, the whole point of Swadharma, is to please the personality of Godhead. So what Krishna is going to bring Arjuna around to is, I want you to do your duty, but you do it for me, to please me. Like if we're trying to be the best father we can be, to please Krishna, to take this little jiva that belongs to Krishna that's in our care and help that jiva live the best possible life in Krishna consciousness. That's the perfection of parenthood. Or the perfection of teaching is wanting to pass on Krishna's message to help people reunite with Krishna so it will please Krishna. That's the perfection of Brahmanism. Otherwise you could have a Brahmin, like there's that famous story of the Brahmin and the prostitute. The Brahmin every day is doing his rituals. He's not thinking what will please Krishna. He's just doing his rituals. And he sees customers going to the prostitute across the road, and he feels all judgmental. So each time he sees someone going to the prostitute, he puts a rock outside her door. And each time she comes out her door, she sees a big pile of rocks growing, and she knows what it means, and she's feeling, I'm so fallen. I should be a great devotee, like this Brahman, but I'm such an unworthy person. And this Brahman is thinking every day, his consciousness is, look at these sinful wretches. Who do you think got the better destination at death? The person thinking I'm so lowly? Or the person thinking I'm so special? So, interesting sort of idea. The Brahmana didn't have Krishna's pleasure on his mind. He was probably just trying to exercise superiority. Feel better, feel judgmental. That's not the Dharma. All right, let's go on. So because because Arjuna is proposing not doing his duty, and because his argument is, I'm not doing it because all these dreadful things will happen. Remember, one of the first things Krishna said after Arjuna stopped speaking, you're speaking learned words, but you're mourning for something that's not worthy of grief. In other words, this sounds like a sophisticated intellectual argument, but you're not as wise as your words suggest because you're lamenting over bodily attachment. It's the immediate verse before he explains you're not that body. Because those who are wise would not be in such a state. Those who really understand things. It sounds pretty heartless, right? Arjuna's just saying, but I can't kill my relatives. And Krishna's sort of telling, do your duty, man up, but if you're worried about sin, do it for me and there won't be any sin. All right. As far as prescribed duties are concerned, they can be fitted into 3 subdivisions. Namely, routine work, the everyday work, emergency work, and Prabhupada's using emergency to describe a word, naimittika, and it means occasional. So the inference about emergency meaning will probably out of the ordinary. I actually got a great example just the other day from Hridayananda Maharaj. And he said, emergency work means, let's say you notice the house next door is on fire, and you run in there and bring their 3 children out. You're probably given a medal. If there's no fire and you go in there and bring out their 3 children, you probably get locked up. Same activity, but the duty is different depending on the emergency. I thought that was kind of an interesting example. I've got a bunch of examples we can walk through. So routine work, emergency work, and desired activities. Desired activities means you're doing the activity, but because you're invested in the outcome. So Krishna's trying to say, Arjuna, because you care too much about what will happen if you do your duty, now you're arguing you shouldn't do your duty. That means you think you are the doer. You think it's all about you. You're controlling the outcome. And even if you just have that mindset, you do become culpable for the outcome. Either way, you're culpable for the outcome if you do it, and culpable for the outcome if you don't, because you've identified yourself as the doer. Is this making any sense? I'm seeing a bit of a furrowed brow, but in many ways what Krishna is doing is disentangling the tangled mess in Arjuna's mind to help him actually see what his straightforward duty may be. And of course Srila Prabhupada is helping us disentangle all of these complex ideas so that we can understand how we might apply them. All right, let's get to the end of the book. Routine work performed as an obligation in terms of the scriptural injunctions without desire for results is action in the mode of goodness. Work with results becomes the cause of bondage. Therefore, such work is not auspicious. Everyone has his propriety right. This word right, the word we have here is adhikar. Right, entitlement, jurisdiction. So it's interesting if you think about jurisdiction. What Krishna is saying is you have a right to do your duty, but you're beyond your jurisdiction to be focused on the results. for you to worry about. It's almost a military level of commitment, right? Ours is to do or die. Therefore, such work with results becomes the cause of bondage. Therefore, such work is not auspicious. Everyone has his proprietary right in regard to prescribed duties, but should act without attachment to the result. Such disinterested, obligatory duties doubtlessly lead one to the path of liberation. Now, here Krishna is arcing back to verses 2:14 and 2:15. If you do your duty, irrespective of the outcome, and you maintain steadiness, tolerating the adverse effect, you become eligible for liberation. In other words, the only way to disentangle yourself isn't to stop doing things, but it's to do them with the right motive, pleasing Krishna. If you're pleasing me, I pay the bill. It's a little bit like, if someone's got a PA, or what do they call those guys in the hotels? There's a name for them anyway. Those guys who run off and do errands for you. So, now, if I basically say, hey, nip down the shops and buy us a bottle of water, it's understood that I'll be paying for that. You won't be paying because you're just doing what I've asked. So it's understood, I will give you the money, you will go. I'm responsible for the purchase because it was my command. So think of it a little bit like that. If I'm just carrying out Krishna's order, I don't get any bill. If I'm acting based on my own assessment of my own interest, I'm fully culpable. Does that make sense? I'm fully entangled, I'm fully karmically implicated. Everyone has a proprietary right in regard to prescribed duties, but should act without attachment to the result. Such disinterested obligatory duties doubtlessly lead one to the path of liberation. Another metaphor you could say, in a time of war, a soldier has immunity from people that they kill. They don't get the same immunity the day they are discharged from the army. And now it's murder. Then it was sanctioned. Arjuna was therefore advised by the Lord to fight as a matter of duty without attachment to the result. His non-participation in the battle is another side of attachment. Such attachment never leads one to the path of salvation. Any attachment, positive or negative, is a cause for bondage. Inaction is sinful. Therefore, fighting as a matter of duty was the only auspicious path of salvation for Arjuna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. All right, let me give you these other little examples and then we can take questions. I'm hoping this is useful because actually we're looking at some very interesting moral philosophy here. And Krishna is dismantling the concept of consequentialism. Consequentialism is probably the default moral philosophy of 99% of people on the planet. I should do something or not do something based on the consequences. The idea is if it seems to harm nobody, a victimless crime, it's not really immoral. And if there is harm, it's immoral. And that's the idea. So we're going to unpick some of the assumptions, or at least examine them. And of course, as I suggested earlier, Arjuna may be even making these consequentialist arguments, but may also be engaged in self-deception. He's reaching for the argument that sounds valid, but his actual reservation is probably family attachment, which is why Krishna calls him out on that. You're lamenting for things that the wise don't lament for. Okay. So here are some examples with consequentialism. There was a drug that came out called thalidomide. You may know of this drug. It caused birth deformities in large swathes of the population. When it first came out, they thought it was going to be a very helpful drug for things. And in some ways, they fast-tracked this drug. I forget exactly what it's for now. But they fast-tracked this drug. Women used to take it during pregnancy or something. Maybe it helped with some preeclampsia or something that would plague women during pregnancy. And they fast-tracked the research. And one lady in America did not allow the drug to go for general release. Not necessarily even about nobility. She just didn't see enough evidence to give her the confidence to say, FDA or whatever, you're now approved. And it turns out that that decision, which she didn't necessarily make being fully informed, saved a load of people from those deformities. So it's an example of an unconscious activity that did in fact produce great results. Now, she might say it was ethics, but generally it's considered a happy accident. She had no idea that there was actually a harm. She just wasn't convinced. She was almost like a rule keeper, as described here. Almost like a penny pincher, like the accountant that doesn't approve anything. Some other examples. When the space shuttle blew up, this famous thing that happened in the mid-90s, the Challenger, I think it was called. So this is a different way of approaching consequentialism. And I'm hoping that these examples help us realize why it's a problematic philosophy. There's a couple of guys who said, if these O-rings go past a certain temperature, then when they expand at takeoff or whatever, it will create a deficiency in the hull of the rocket. No, they said all those things and they were ignored. And then it blew up. But what if it hadn't blown up? When they first raised their concerns, they were considered wrong. Not exactly immoral, but they're holding up the process of a launch. It's only in hindsight that we say they actually had the right idea. But the problem with consequentialism is, unless the consequence happens, you don't know. So we're judging right and wrong afterwards. And they could have been in a position where they'd done their duty and nothing happened and they would have been considered wrong. And here's another one. Sometime in the 1980s, there was a Russian submarine commander who was told to launch nuclear war, World War III. Something came on the radar that was read as the US have launched an attack, and he got the instruction, no, we've got to retaliate. If he'd carried out that instruction, we wouldn't be here. The world would have come to an end. But he didn't follow the instruction. He didn't know for sure that it was a false alarm. But he decided he didn't want it on his conscience. In hindsight, we now know he made the right decision. But again, at the time, it was considered a wrong decision. Had it actually been a US attack, which we now know it wasn't, then we might look back at his decision differently. And certainly his kinsmen would if they were still alive. All right. Now we're going to look at a few examples where consequences were used and we learned better later. Lobotomies. So this is where, possibly to help people with epilepsy or other behavioral issues or fits and other things, they would drill a hole and actually kill a certain part of the brain or remove it. And it seemed to help a lot of people. At least the fits stopped. We only later learned, even though our motivations had been to help people, that actually we were really harming people. So the consequentialist argument was given. But of course, we didn't even know the full consequences. So it could be dangerous. And that's why Krishna's saying, look, your jurisdiction is the action, not the consequence. That's not for you to decide. This is Krishna's basic argument. Eugenics. Does this make sense? Eugenics. This was an idea that certain populations are disadvantaged. Maybe they should be sterilized so they can't procreate and bring more of their unfortunate kind into the world. Even Helen Keller was a eugenicist. And again, now most people would look back at eugenics and with horror that human beings ever thought this way. But it's a consequentialist argument. They thought we are saving people from suffering. Stolen generation is the same idea, right? We're going to take the children away from these primitive people because we'll give them a better life. Horrific, but it's a consequentialist argument. Last couple. There was, in the Second World War, there were a couple of German scientists who defected and gave information to the Home Office in London. These V1s have got a fault in their steering. So they'll probably fall short of London. They probably won't come all the way. And so the strategy by the Home Office was to keep telling Germany that they'd had a direct hit on central London. Meanwhile, Croydon is taking all the hits. Essentially, it's the trolley problem, right? They save central London by throwing somebody else under the bus. Consequentialism. And then the last one, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. I mean, these are all big ones, right? But the argument was, if we vaporize these few 100,000 people, then we don't have a boots-on-the-ground war, and the war comes to an end, and many more lives will be saved. You can see how it's getting into very strange moral territory, consequentialism. I'm almost done, and then we'll take questions. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I did also look at his commentary. He basically gives a four, the punchline is four. Reject akarma. Reject not doing things. That's not the right path. And reject vikarma, doing the wrong things. And Prabhupada also criticizes inactivity more than anything. Whenever Prabhupada did relate to the verse, it was the akarma. Don't think you can just go to the forest, do nothing, and become Krishna conscious. You could even argue Prabhupada set up the big mission that we're all engaged with in the Krishna conscious movement because he knows we couldn't just sit there and chant 24 hours a day. So if these people are going to be fidgety, let me give them a project that engages them rather than them becoming inactive. So reject akarma, reject vikarma, and then within karma, reject the pursuit of the fruits, but practice the eternal and the occasional prescribed duties. Does it make sense? No akarma, no vikarma, no kamya, fruitive work, but nitya and naimitika, the duties that you do. Okay. So Krishna is essentially reducing Arjuna's options. Arjuna has argued that he shouldn't fight. Krishna's closing down inaction, wrong action, and being attached to the fruits, leaving the only path that is approved. Do your duty to please me. Which is the essence of Krishna consciousness. I hope that was useful. I know it's a complex subject, but I hope I didn't make it more dense and difficult to get at, and maybe helped it become a little accessible. Srila Prabhupada ki. Time for questions, if you're so minded. Were there any things that we touched on today that poked a little bit at your curiosity? What's that? Originally. Yeah, no, the fight does happen. And so you might want to read the Mahabharata at some point. A friend of mine, Krishna Dharma, has got a very readable Mahabharata. There's lots of different versions out there. And that's the entire story of the Pandavas, right from, in fact, it goes back several generations. From memory, it starts with maybe their great-grandfather, Maharaj Satyaki, is that right? Anyway. Memory's fading a little bit, but it goes way, way back. And then, yes, there were 18 days of war, a very, very bloody war, which almost nobody walked away from. Even, the Pandavas themselves, the 5 Pandavas walked away. Maybe a handful of others. Arjuna is, one of the Pandavas. He lives. And they do take the kingdom up. And actually only for like 20 years or something. So even after all of this, because they had to reclaim. So if we go back a little bit, and I hope this isn't too much of a tangent. Right at the beginning of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 10th canto is all about Krishna. The very first few verses describe Mother Earth, Bhumi, the personified deity of the planet, going to Lord Brahma, the sort of boss of the universe, and saying, I've got all these kings building up all of these big armies. It's giving me distress. Could you make an arrangement? And he goes and talks to Lord Vishnu, Mahavishnu, or Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, explains the predicament. And as Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita, yes, whenever and wherever there's a rise in irreligion, a need to re-establish dharma, I come and I vanquish the demons. So Krishna essentially came to get rid of all these built-up armies, and Kurukshetra was the tactic for doing it. And interestingly, Krishna, his own army didn't take part. He also became a non-combatant. He was just Arjuna's charioteer. So at the end of the war, when all of these armies have been wiped out, he makes an arrangement to have his own army wiped out so that he's not leaving a residual army. So it's a very different idea maybe of how, we might think of God in those ways. And we could, where were you going with your question? Because I might have interrupted you too early. You're just curious to know if the battle happened. Okay. Yeah. Oh no, and I keep going, and I hope I'm not doing a spoiler for you then. In the 11th chapter of the Gita, Krishna shows his universal form to Arjuna. And Arjuna literally sees all of the armies on the battlefield rushing into Lord Vishnu's mouth, being devoured. And he says to him, the outcome of this battle is already decided. Already won it. But if you like, you can be an instrument. This is a very important concept. We don't believe in everything being predestined. Krishna knows, because Krishna is omniscient, he knows past, present, and future. But we still have freedom. So Krishna basically says, look, the outcome of this fight is already determined by me. You simply have a choice whether you're a part of it or not. And he's encouraging him. And yes, by the end, Arjuna says, look, my doubts are now, they're gone. I'll do whatever you ask of me. But even right to the end, Krishna's saying, anyway, look, I've given you my view. Now it's up to you to decide what you're going to do. But yes, Arjuna does conclude that the fighting is necessary. And yeah, it's a horrific, horrific battle. Arjuna was one of the younger brothers of Yudhishthira. So Yudhishthira was the eldest brother of the Pandavas. So he was the one who stood to become king. But obviously it's a royal family, and Arjuna had a duty and so on. Arjuna was generally considered the premier warrior, at least on Yudhishthira's side. Actually, there was one superior warrior, Karna, a lesser-known older brother who was on the other side. There's such a lot in this story. Like, the round, at the moment, Odysseus is doing the rounds and Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and so on. They pale into insignificance compared to Mahabharata. And they may have even borrowed from Mahabharata. It's possible. There may have even been a little bit of that. For instance, Achilles. Achilles, we know, in the Odyssey, he's immortal because he was dipped in nectar. But because he was held by his ankle was still vulnerable. Well, there's almost the same story in Mahabharata about the thigh of Duryodhana. It was the one place he covered himself. His mother was to glance and make him immortal. And he covered himself, his modesty, with some cloth. And when she saw him, "What have you done? That part will not be immortal." And that's exactly where he was killed. So, Mahabharata predates Odyssey. But because most of these cultures were oral cultures, stories were passed down, it's not surprising that over time, as things spread, maybe some variances in the way the story was told. Why does every of these ancient cultures have a flood story? Every single one of them has a flood story. The Gilgamesh, the Vedas, the Bible, all of them. And it very likely was, a flood event not so long ago in human history, such that it has come down to us through the stories. It was probably written down much later. But there's a lot of correlation. A lot of correlation. Any other questions? Maybe we can use the microphone because other people tuning... No, it's just that other people tuning in, they should be able to hear you. I can barely hear you. Give it a go.
Thank you. So you say the question is on karma, on duties, on duties,
duty,
on what you say, not you, but do or not do. How, and destiny decided up front, you said at the end. So it's all kind of thinking in my head, if it's been decided, how does it work with us taking decisions? And how to take the right decision? It's to do the right...
It's not exactly decided, but Krishna does know what choice you'll make.
So I don't know what choice to make.
No, you do. You have full free will. But Krishna also knows what you'll do. I know it's difficult for us to fathom, because how could he possibly have foreknowledge of a choice we haven't made yet? The best explanation I can offer is that we live in a world that's bound by time. We can't think outside of time. One thing happens before another, past, present, and future. Krishna operates outside of that. So for him, there's no difference between past, present, and future. He just knows it. But that doesn't mean he takes away our agency. Does that make sense? So the point is, Krishna wasn't dependent on Arjuna to show up, just like Lord Chaitanya isn't dependent on us or ISKCON to spread his movement around the world. But he's giving us the opportunity to be a part of it, to be constructive instruments and participants. And it's our good fortune if we choose to. And if we turn out not to, A, it's not a surprise to him. B, he already had a backup plan. And the backup plan is already in motion. And in fact, even though we might think of it as a backup plan, he always knew it was the primary plan. But he still gave us an opportunity. If we're trying to fully conceive of it, we're going to struggle. In fact, even the word conceive, just consider this word. We use it to hold an idea. We also talk about impregnation as conception. So conception could be an idea, or it could be the birth of coming to life of something. A concept is actually something you hold. So conception literally just means a container. So we're trying to put God in a container. Of course we can't conceive. He's too big for the container. Whatever container our mind can come up with, whatever dimensions we can think of, Krishna's already bigger than that. So it's in that kind of area. It's not a cop-out. It's just acknowledging our limitations. Are you satisfied? You may not be satisfied. Maybe it sounds like sophistry.
It also was my concern for a while. Sorry. Was my concern for a while that in Bhagavad-gita, this example on the battlefield about duties, for a while I was thinking anyone can use this as an excuse to do something,
No, that's what I'm saying.
Thinking I'm doing the duties.
Prescribed duties are actually, as the word implies, prescribed. Shastra tells you, we can't just make it up. So, I listed yajan, patan, dan, pratigra. These are the 6 primary duties of a brahmana. The brahmana can't go, I don't think my duty is to perform sacrifice and study. I'd prefer to have a duty about painting. That would be capricious work. That means you're acting outside of your authority. It's unapproved, and therefore you get the entire bill. It's almost like you get a fine for it. You parked where you shouldn't have parked. Fine. So, it's true that our mind, and because we have free will, our mind can word juggle. And we can often convince and rationalize ourselves to do all kinds of things and make arguments for it. So the conditioned soul will always be trying to game the system. That's part of what conditioned soul means, right? The 4 defects of the conditioned soul: to make mistakes, to be in illusion, deception, and imperfect knowledge or imperfect senses. So deception, gaming, we're trying to game the system. Can I get the result without the austerity? Can I earn the big bucks and not pay any tax? It's the nature of sort of a self-interested soul to see what they can get away with. And what Krishna is saying to Arjuna, don't make it up as you go along. One of the Arjuna's proposals has been, maybe I'll go and meditate in the forest. He thinks because he's proposing a spiritual path, he's going to get Krishna's approval. And Krishna said, you can't go against your own nature. Meaning you'll probably get yourself in a scrap somewhere in the forest because you're a Kshatriya. It's in you. It's part of who you are in this world. So don't try to deny your nature. And he even goes into, it's wrong to do the duty of another. Your duty is courage in battle, not retreating from the world and going to, that's not your part. Does it make sense? So Arjuna tried to express what his preference was, and Krishna shut him down.
Sorry. So, for example, take my life. I became accountant as of today, and I want to change and become someone else.
No, that's
Does
different.
it mean
That's so the prescribed duties, which is what we're talking about here, and this word prescribed is very critical. So Varnashram isn't just people making stuff up. There's a code that a Brahmin has to follow. There's a code that a Kshatriya has to follow. And these are built in. Being an accountant, actually in the Vedic system, this would be called kayasta. It's one of the types of sudras. And we might think, oh, sudra, that sounds low. Well, actually, 90% of any population is sudra. And sudras were artisans and craftspeople and clerics and all kinds of other jobs. The whole, Prabhupada compares it to the feet. The body can't move without the labor force. So an accountant would be in there. If you switch from being an accountant to, let's say, a lawyer, you've not reneged on your duty, because your duty would be much more fundamental, as you'd have certain duties as a woman, certain duties as a daughter, certain duties as a wife if you are a wife. And then as a Sudra, it would be mostly just to deliver honest and good service to whoever is your employer. There's not a huge amount. Sudras are meant to marry rather than, it's the only one of the big ceremonies that applies. They don't take sannyas. They don't get initiated, generally. But this is only social class. It's not your identity as purely what job you do. It's just there's a prescription for how you fulfill your job. Your bigger identity, the eternal identity, is you're Krishna's eternal servant. And one of the other things that's why Varnashram we see as external. It's necessary, but it's not the goal. It's a platform to reach for the goal. There's a very famous verse Lord Chaitanya uses. Kiba Bipra, Kiba Nyasi, Sudra Kaninoi, Jai Krishna Tattvaveta, Sei Guru Hoi. So this is in Bengali. Kiba Vipra, whether you're a Vipra, a Brahmana, Kiba Nyasi, or whether you're a sannyasi, Sudra Kaninoi, or whether you're a Sudra, Jai Krishna Tattva Veta Sei Guru Hoi. Anyone who knows the science of Krishna, regardless of those designations, can be a guru. Prabhupada used this verse to explain why women can be gurus, even though, as I said at the beginning, there's a movement of people who want to prevent women from being gurus. But Prabhupada said, no, this verse is the evidence. Doesn't matter, man, woman. Any of these designations are temporary. They do not restrict Vaishnavas. So that's the main identity. And that's why the punchline of this whole thing is what Prabhupada keeps going, Samsiddhir Haritoshanam. If it doesn't lead to the pleasing of Krishna, it was a waste of time. So the duties are just meant to regulate our lives, so we have somewhat sane rather than disordered lives. We can be in the mode of goodness, and then we can practice Krishna consciousness easily. If we start to renege on our duties, that's when, like Arjuna's saying, then we've got kids who grow up without proper parents, we've got people who aren't paying their tax obligations, we've got Brahmanas who aren't doing the teaching but just occupying the role, we've got Kshatriyas who are fleecing the population rather than protecting the population. Certain US president comes to mind, etc.
Sorry, maybe question not on this topic, but you said, what does it... Sorry. What does it mean? You said, please do something to please Krishna. What do you mean by that? To please Krishna.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's the whole goal of devotional service, is to make Krishna happy, to give Krishna what Krishna wants. Well, yeah, okay. So, we have constitutional position, Krishna's eternal servant. That leads us to engage in bhakti, in devotional service. But obviously, we still need to be practical about how we organize our life. So, let's go through those different stations. When a child is born, he's not in any ashram initially. He's in the parent's home, he or she. In the Vedic times, the daughter would stay in the parents' home all the way through till marriage. That was the Vedic system. And the boys would be sent to Gurukula, or the ashram of the Guru, where they would learn. And in modern day, if you've decided to move into the temple and live as a brahmacharya, you're following brahmachari dharma. You have no possessions. You just do menial service voluntarily. You study. You prepare for your life. This is student life. Normally it ends by the time you hit your 20s, just as our educational system does as well. And then most people would go into household life. Marriage. Sometimes that marriage may have been arranged younger, but Prabhupada generally does it in quarters. 25 years student, 25 years household, 25 years retired, 25 years renounced. That's how Prabhupada tends to carve it up. So, in our household life, one of our duties as a householder is to have an income and provide for our children and these things. So then we must have a livelihood. And then the four livelihoods come in. We're either employed, running a business, running a government, or a teacher. Those are the four essential divisions. And even though we might say, but there's thousands of jobs out there, if you apply some analysis, they fit into the four categories. Like if you're in law enforcement, it's a form of Kshatriya activity. If you're working in the government, you might be a cleric, but you're sort of part of a Kshatriya organism. But you're probably a Shudra working for a Kshatriya. Reality is you see very few real Kshatriyas nowadays. You still have political heads. They're not monarchs. They're not noble. We have a few, paper monarchs left, like in Spain, Denmark, England. Like, there's someone who's still called a monarch, but they don't have the powers that Yudhishthira and Arjuna had, where they were literally the person calling every shots, the final authority in the kingdom. It's more of a ceremonial position now. Anyway, I'm waffling a little bit, but the idea is that it's all covered in the Varnashram system. Every single place you can be in your life, it's defined how the codes are for that stage, that life stage, that position. And so we discharge devotional service for Krishna, we come and see him, we bow down to him, we sing for him, we chant, we cook for him, we offer things to him. That's bhakti, devotional service. But then you could say you can't do that for 24 hours a day. And we have to live and work. Therefore, we follow the system that Krishna gave us for living and working. And that way we can be 24 hours engaged. And if we're doing Varnashram to please Krishna, it's non-different than devotional service. It's exactly the same. Even Arjuna choking the life out of someone on a battlefield, non-different than the pujari offering a flower. Just as pleasing to Krishna. It's a difficult idea for us to get our heads around. Any other questions? Well, and keep studying. That's actually one of the most... in fact, this verse I quoted earlier from Lord Chaitanya is so profound. Like, Ramananda Roy has proposed even things like surrender to Krishna. No. It's quite surprising. Why would he reject surrender to Krishna as the answer of the goal of life? The first thing he accepted is situate yourself wherever is appropriate within Varnashram. Stane stita. Stay where you are in Varnashram. Because that's the right place for you to have a sane and ordered life. But tan vag manobhya. But you immerse yourself in learning about my messages. Hearing, taking knowledge in, is the primary form of devotional service. So listening to messages about Krishna, listening to Krishna's direct words, listening to stories about Krishna, all of these things have the most profound effect on our heart. Because it's a vibration, particularly if it's coming from a pure-hearted soul. I'm not making any such claim, but if it's coming from a pure-hearted soul, even that vibration has potency. You could say if we're discharging service, we can still contaminate it with our mindset. I can be singing Hare Krishna thinking, how wonderful do I sing? I wonder if the girls are noticing today. So I'm singing Hare Krishna, and Krishna's maybe looking at the mentality and going, what? And more pleasing would be Arjuna in deep conflict internally, but still doing Krishna's bidding on the battlefield. More devotional. So that gives you some idea. There's a verse, let's see if I can remember it. Anukulena Krishnanushi. There's a verse that I'm just not quite remembering from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where it talks about, pleasing Krishna means giving Krishna what he likes. Just like if somebody knows your favorite song and your favorite meal and your favorite place, and then they take you to that place and they have this lovely meal and there's some musician there and everything, you'll be pleased because they've made an effort to understand what pleases you and then they've offered it in love. Now that's really what bhakti is. We're trying to understand what will please Krishna. That's why listening is actually really good. We can learn how to distinguish what does and doesn't please Krishna. And it's not as black and white as we might assume. So yeah, if you're studying, reading, that's a kind of listening. And if you're receptive, like the questions that you've asked, this is actually one of the most important parts of progressing in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada would be concerned when people had no questions, because actually coming up with a question is a sign of intelligence. It's a sign that I'm engaged with the material. If it just washes over me and I don't have a question, oh. In fact, the ability to form curiosity and questions is a uniquely human thing. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now you've become a human, it's all about questions. And every human at some point in their life will ask the big questions. Now I'm not knocking the other creatures, and Prabhupada would even say, you hear the bird chirping, you go, oh, such a beautiful song. Maybe they're singing about creation. Maybe they're just saying, Mom, I'm hungry. We have no idea. So maybe there are, where's the food, where's the predator? There may be questions. But I can say one interesting piece of social science. There are certain apes that they teach language to. Obviously, it doesn't have the same vocal abilities that we may have, but it can understand words. And it can express words, but it will do it through sign language or whatever. But they said even though there are some gorillas and other apes that actually have a vocabulary of about 400 words, it's pretty impressive. They've never asked a question. Never. So that says something. Well, yeah. The point is, maybe they don't think we've got any good answers. They've taken one look at our life and gone, we can't learn anything from these people. Any final questions before we let you go? But I just wanted to encourage you, doing exactly the right thing. And in terms of where should I be situated, again, you don't have to be too eager, too stressed about it. Pick these things up gradually. The fact that you're applying yourself to learning about Krishna first, that's actually more important. There's a famous verse which is often abused. Apichet sudaracharo bhajati mamananyuba, 9:30. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, generally, your conditioned life, a devotee's conditioned life, what we have to do to operate in this world, and your devotional life are running in parallel. But there might be a time where the one interferes with the other. Now, what he's talking about, Arjuna is invoking various swadharmas, but I can't kill my guru. I can't kill all of these elders. I can't do that. That's against dharma. And so Prabhupada is saying in this verse, well, sometimes what Krishna wants you to do and Dharma appear to not necessarily be absolutely aligned. So therefore the verse is, even the most abominable of activity. Let me actually read the verse so I'm not just paraphrasing it. This is in chapter 9, text 30. I want to make sure I give it you without any spin. Even if one commits the most abominable action. Now, where it gets misused is people go, oh, then I've got license to do abominable actions. And that's not what it's saying. If he's engaged in devotional service, he's to be considered saintly because he's properly situated in his determination. So the point Prabhupada makes is there might be a slip where someone's old conditioning has interrupted their serving Krishna exclusively. But if in their heart they're all about serving Krishna, Krishna may excuse the slip. But why was he saying this to Arjuna here? Arjuna's talked about the abominable activity of the war, or the abominable activity of not respecting his elders. And Krishna's saying, if you're engaged in devotional service, even if you happen to, in the course of doing your service, do some horrible things, you're still to be considered a saint. In other words, it's not a permanent stain on your character. It's not a license, though, for intentionally. Hey, Krishna's given me a free pass. Yay! That's a real abuse. And unfortunately, as we said earlier, human beings have got an intellect to justify just about anything if they put their minds to it. You could literally, and there's been many things that have been done justified off maybe what Prabhupada had taught, but clearly not what Prabhupada would have approved. So this questioning is also about the ability to use discernment. And that's why rather than speculate, oh, I'm not sure what that means, placing the question, then patiently hearing the answer and keep applying ourselves. This is the process. Krishna witnesses our yearning to understand something, and he sees that as a form of service to him, and he helps us. He helps us understand. If we're sincere, he helps us. There's even one place where Prabhupada said, let's say the guru has the disciple has the opportunity to learn from his guru, but he's essentially too dumb to ask the right question. He doesn't exactly say it like that, but the idea is he's not in a position where he knows how to take full advantage of the guru's presence. If he's sincere, Krishna will still reveal truth to him. And maybe I'll finish on one little story, which is actually great evidence of this. When Lord Chaitanya was traveling around South India, he came to a temple, and there was a man outside with a kind of book. I say book, in those days, this was before the printing press. A book literally meant I'd handwritten someone else's copy on my own papyrus leaves, and they were all bound together, and that's my copy. So it's not that you could just go to the photocopier, or you could run off a copy or download a copy. No. If you wanted a book in those days, you'd literally have to write it out by hand onto leaves. So this gentleman was going through the leaves of his copy of Bhagavad-gita, and he was crying. And the townspeople were all mocking him because he was illiterate. Oh, look at this guy trying to read. He can't read. What a fool. And he was crying. And Lord Chaitanya asked him, are you crying because they're mocking you? He said, no. They're right to mock me. It is a silly situation, but why do I do it? My guru told me to read Bhagavad-gita. So I'm gradually trying to learn how to read, but at least I can turn the pages. He said, why am I crying? Because as I turn the pages of Bhagavad-gita, some image comes to my mind of how wonderful Krishna is to become Arjuna's charioteer. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. People should be serving him. Meanwhile, he's the one taking the arrows. He's the one where the horses are kicking up the dust. He's the one shoveling the horse manure to take care of the... He loves his devotees so much. When I think about Krishna's love for his devotees, tears come. And Lord Chaitanya said, "You're the real scholar of Bhagavad-gita." So again, I'm editorializing now, but how do we explain that realization? Why was Krishna going to give him secret knowledge that even great scholars might not know? Great scholars might not have made this connection, this insight this person has made. Because he's faithfully trying to do his spiritual master's will without attachment to the result. We sing it every day, actually. Guru mukha padma vakya chitte te koriya aikya arna koriho mani aso. Make the words from the mouth of your spiritual master one with your heart, and don't desire anything else. It's all there. I know we often translate it differently, but that's literally what those words mean. Yeah. Anyway, I can take other questions if there's an interest. I know I've probably gone way over time, but if we're not inconveniencing anybody, maybe you came to chant your japa. Any other questions? Because this is the rare human life where we've got this thin window of time to figure out what's going on before we get recycled and have to start over. And it's very short. Oh no, I'm happy to be of service. Like, I feel like it's what become. If we've had the opportunity to have knowledge revealed to us, passing it along, paying it forward, that's the best we can do. Like, we can't pay it back. We didn't deserve this gift, but we can offer it to others.
I've realized through practicing devotional service that, I've kind of like realized how I was trying to explain this correctly, but, there's a way of perceiving that comes through the mind. And the mind is so, like, attached to strong emotions. And so it's so, like, when you see, and I see it now in other people too, when you're, like, perceiving the world through that lens, it's so unstable. But I'm seeing through, maybe it's the mode of goodness too, but, doing devotional service, you come to a platform of intelligence where you can perceive things, intelligently. Is this true? Is this false? And then being able to discern on that platform. But I'm wondering, how do we stay on that platform of intelligence? Because association is so important, and with association of devotees, it's easier. But then it's like, okay, but I'm not always going to be in association with devotees.
It's a brilliant question. Oh, sorry. You may not have finished it.
No, yeah.
Krishna describes a hierarchy in the 3rd chapter. Indriya, well, actually it's matter, prakriti, so dead inert matter. It could sit there for the rest of the time, it'll never move because it has no soul. Inert matter. Indriya, the senses, the first sign that there is consciousness inside anything mundane, so living matter, you could say. Indriya. So the senses are signs of life. Next, manush, the mind. Next, buddhi, intelligence. So this hierarchy is really important. You've described something, a very profound question actually, that the mind is like a lens that we look through. So depending on the shape of our mind, just like maybe you go to the hall of mirrors or something and it distorts, or concave, convex, and so on. So if our mind is in the grip of a strong emotion, and even though we use the word mind interchangeably in Western speak with intelligence, actually Vedas locates it more like with heart. Thinking, feeling, willing. Where is our attention? What thoughts are even coming unbidden? If you think about it, you don't exactly manufacture your thoughts. Sometimes you'll have thoughts that you don't want to have. They just come. And Krishna describes all this in 2nd canto, Apuryamanam achala pratishtam, a person who allows the thoughts to come and go like rivers flow into the ocean, which remains still. and doesn't chase after those desires. You could say that the desire appearing in the mind, thinking, feeling, willing, is a proposition from the false ego. You could enjoy like this, you could enjoy like this, you could enjoy like that. Another thing about mind, sankalpa vikalpa, accepting and rejecting. Something is pleasing, something is displeasing. So our mind has preferences. So for instance, the alarm clock goes off in the morning. Now if your mind is anything like mine, this is not greeted with great happiness. Groan. The disinclination, I do not feel like waking. I feel like I want to slumber longer. Feel, mind. It means that it is an urge. A person who is in possession, I guess, of a working intellect will go, no, this is the time to get up and sing Hare Krishna and get fresh and achieve things, not stay in bed, and they override the disinclination. The inclination or disinclination, sankalpa, vikalpa, that is the mind. And it's really conditioned, like its current preferences are not educated preferences. Maybe it likes sugar. Maybe it likes the opposite sex. Maybe it likes TV. It has almost all these different appetites, and it's actually the job of our intelligence to regulate the mind. The example given actually is that the mind is like the reins of the horses. The horses are the senses, and the mind is supposed to be keeping a handle on the senses, but if the rein is not actually being controlled, the horses are pulling this way and this way and this way, the whole chariot goes off the edge of a cliff. The intelligence is the driver that's meant to be keeping a grip on the reins. So we should be observing our mind, not believing our mind. We might go, oh, I'm feeling a little sad today. I could be wallowing, if I don't do something about this feeling, I could be wallowing in self-pity for days. Intellect, what has provoked this sadness, and what steps might I take? And could I think different thoughts? And could I do things that would make me happy or whatever? So the intelligence is meant to be almost like the sentry, the programmer, the witness, the disciplinarian. Intelligence is meant to be working out what's the right thing to do, and the mind is just going with its instinctual, what I feel like doing, what I'm reacting to do. So we actually have to observe it and not just become a slave to it. And the discipline, the override, doing it despite not feeling like doing it, that's the intellect overcoming the mind. But if our intellect is weak, most of the time, if our intellect has said, well, I'm not sure I'm a soul, so this life is probably the all in all, and it is short, I better get my fun in ahead of everybody else. Mind, what programs of fun have you got in mind for me? And they just, because the intellect has become lazy and it's no longer got any discernment, the mind has just got a free rein. It doesn't get you very far. So at some point, and this is where the questions come in, the questions being a function of intellect, at some point we should have accumulated enough evidence that this strategy isn't working out too well, and look for a new paradigm, look for a new mindset, look for a new lens. That's really the questioning of human life. But keeping our mind in check, it's had eons to learn how to have its own way, and even dupe us. So we really have to sharpen our intellect. And that's a good argument actually for really learning good philosophy, because it gives us more to be vigilant about. It gives us more tools to notice what's going on. If we haven't really got a reinforced intelligence, we've got a flabby intelligence and wild horses, good luck with that. I don't know, that may be waffly, but hopefully it helped. Well, There are favorable environments and unfavorable environments. So environment like this, where we're seeing Krishna everywhere and devotees, and yes, that's very favorable. But if we were in an environment where, it was a party and the drugs were being passed around and grungy music and, that's the kind of people we're hanging with, grotty, dirty, well, yeah, something else will happen. And that's the idea, is that our intelligence wants to situate ourselves where it's favorable. And it knows what favorable is. Whereas our instincts, our urges, almost the animalistic side of our nature, that's just like, where's the cake? Look at her, she's pretty well put together. It's just distracted.
I was just going to add to that wonderful reply, thank you, that it's kind of like a combination, isn't it? Like, you have your intelligence, your mind, and your senses, and it kind of all works together. For instance, using your intelligence, like, that it's that overhaul, but, even controlling, your senses is such a big factor, just through like one thing that you could engage in. Like, I don't know, maybe it's like eating food that's not offered. And then that's like a whole other thing, by just like controlling your senses, and then your intelligence controlling your mind. It all works together, and it builds like kind of like a barrier,
This is why we say Chaitodharpana Marjanam, chanting clears the mind. It just gets rid of all those layers of dust and gunk. You could say a mirror is a seeing thing, and a lens is a seeing thing. So it's a similar thing. If the lens is all, we can't even make out what's what. So chanting will actually rid the heart of the competing motives. Does that make sense? The desire to enjoy, the taste for the dirty things. It'll actually, over time, replace them, and we'll learn how to develop a different kind of appetite. But the intelligence is what keeps us steady and fixed. As long as we have any unwanted things in the heart, our heart is not yet fully clean. There's a risk to our commitment, our discipline, our steadiness, our resolve. It could be thrown off. So nishtha, steadiness, is after anartha-nivritti, meaning you only achieve that steady state of unwavering commitment once you've got rid of the competing gunk that tends to throw us off. And that's why the best ways to fortify our intelligence are things like study, good devotee association, chanting sincerely. And Krishna helps from within. We're getting help and support from without. Because, it's no small business. I mean, Arjuna said it might be easier to control the wind. Krishna said, but it's possible by detachment. So
that's why humility is so important, isn't it? That's why we stress humility, because being able to chant in a humble state of mind, you can actually recognize those things, those impurities within ourselves, and then detach from them as well, and then be sincere.
Humility means we're teachable. Humility means we're not trying to lord it over others. We're probably feel inclined to serve. So these are all really good things with humility. And generally, humility is seen as one of the most clear signs of advanced consciousness, like genuine humility, not the posy kind of humility where did everybody notice how humble I was? Did you notice? But where we're actually genuinely more interested in others. Generally more compassionate than self-serving. But the thing is that this is our conditioning goes back for eons, millions and millions of births. So there's quite a lot of old habits to rewire. But we're not alone. The holy name is so potent that it will actually not only clean the heart of those other motives, it frees us from all previous sin. And that's not even the pure chanting, that's just the clearing stage. The clearing stage of the holy name gives you everything up till liberation. What it doesn't give you is love for Krishna. That requires Shuddhanam, pure chanting. But the point is the clearing stage, becoming free from offenses, that's the stepping stone to Shuddhanam. And certainly your heart can be fully cleansed. And therefore, yeah, you wouldn't have any problems with the mind in those instances. But, yeah, it's almost like a toddler that's just freaked out and has been getting its own way with the parents for many, 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 many births. And you can see sometimes when you deny your mind what it aches for, it has a tantrum. I mean, it literally behaves like that kid rolling around in the aisles at the supermarket to try and punish you for disciplining it. So, good association is probably the most important. Holy name to clean the heart. And then fortify our intelligence. Right now, if our intelligence hasn't been properly exercised, it's like puny. A workout with the scriptures. Now it can take the mind on and give it a good scrap.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions? Otherwise, we'll let you all go about your busy days. Arti's coming up in about 20 minutes. Hare Krishna. Glories to Prabhupada. Clearing stage. So there's 3 kinds of chanting. You can look this up in Prabhupada's books. Offensive chanting. Even that bestows some benefits, but it's more like good karma sukriti, which actually could be problematic because you get good karma, you get your desires met. So obviously we want to avoid offenses because, as we sing in the morning, you can chant for thousands of years and not get the goal. So then the question might be asked, what is the clearing stage? We can't go directly from offensive to pure. And it's called in different literature different things. Namabhas, a reflection of the name. Namabhas. You've heard this word? So it means like a reflection of the chanting, or reflection's probably the best word. Namabhas means we might not yet be fully clear. Called the clearing stage, so it's the stage where the clearing is happening. But at least we are endeavoring to be free from offense, and our chanting appeals to Krishna because it's not got the offensive stuff going on. It's just not yet Shuddhanam, pure love for God. So the reality is, it has to be at least our effort when we're chanting japa to get to Namabhas. If we're not paying attention, which is probably the most common offense, just drifting here and there. There's a lovely book actually called Harinam Chintamani, and it's by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He describes all of this. And he describes 3 reasons why we're inattentive. One is we don't have a natural taste, so we have to make a lot of effort. The second is that we're lazy. In other words, we don't want to make the effort, bringing our minds back all the time. And then the third one is distraction. We get engaged with something else, and even the prospect of thinking about what we're chanting has disappeared. So if we start to gradually eliminate these offenses, consciously wanting our chanting to be more pleasing to Krishna, begging for service, we're careful with devotees, we don't blaspheme the scriptures, we follow the spiritual master's orders, then we start to enter that clearing stage. And that's where it's real potent progress is happening. Just not the full love of God. Everything up to that. Literally all the way to liberation from the material world. No more sins, no more anathas. Namabhasa. B-H-A-S-A. Bhasa. You've heard people say rasabas? It's the same word. Namabhasa. Put it this way, we're not going to clear any anatas if we're not chanting at least Namabhasa. If we're chanting offensively, in fact, offensiveness is even more problematic than an anartha, because it's actually getting Krishna offside. So an anartha just means an impediment, a misconception, a fear, an ulterior motive. And actually, these are all described. The main anarthas are described. There are thousands. The chief ones are in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Nisidacha. Nisidacha means behavior not expected of one seeking perfection. So breaking the four legs. That's what Prabhupada translated Nisidacha. And that's mainly when he talks about the rhythm, he's talking about that. Mostly. Kutinati. Duplicity, hypocrisy, pretending to be a devotee, concealing that one isn't a devotee, or at least that, trying to get the honor, stolen valor kind of way. Jiva hingsan, violence to other living beings. Prabhupada even includes not preaching as part of jiva himsa. Yeah, and then puja, labha pratishta, profit, adoration, and distinction. So, if you go to the 19th chapter of Madhya Lila, start at verse 150. Yeah, but the point is, you're actually, even from the way you've worded your questions, you've picked up a lot. Like, I'm seriously impressed with how much you know. Madhya Lila, chapter 19, text 159, and then for about 10 verses. 159 you'll have heard, Brahmanda Pramite Kom Bhagavanji Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhaktilata Peace. That's about the seed of devotional service. And then it fully develops the metaphor. Yeah. He fully develops the metaphor around, so you need to plant it in your heart, the seed, and water it by hearing and chanting, guard it against offenses, make sure the mad elephant doesn't come. And then it says certain weeds grow along with the creeper. Now the weeds are watered by offensive chanting. So in other words, if I've got another desire, maybe I've got a desire to please Krishna, but I've also got a desire to become rich and famous. If my chanting is offensive, I'm watering both the devotional creeper and that ulterior motive. So it might become even, and the metaphor says, just like weeds in a garden can actually strangle the plant that you really want. So anything that's not, let's say you're growing roses, anything that's not a rose is a weed, even a chrysanthemum. Or a rose could be a weed if what you're trying to grow is tomatoes. So the description is said, in the early stages, you might not know the difference between the weed and the creeper. They might look alike. And that's why if you think about some of the weeds, I could be a celebrated devotee. And I've lost clean motivation. Now it's all about the crowd and looking great. So the other book that you might not know it's called Madhurya Kadambini. Madhurya Kadambini. And it's by Vishwanath Chakravarti. And he actually describes the Shraddha to frame in much more detail. The whole book really is about that. And he talks about unsteady devotional service and nishtita bhakti caused by the anarthas. And he talks about the 6 kinds of unsteady devotional service. The first one is utsahamaya, false enthusiasm. I think I know it all. I'm already talking to the older devotees like I'm the one who's got better knowledge. You've already, the fanatic, that kind of utsaha mind, like unearned confidence or whatever. And then ganatarula, do I renounce, don't I renounce? So flicking back and forth. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami gives us the anarthas, what we're trying to uproot. And then this guy, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, this book describes what a state our devotional service might look like that would be a tell that anarthas are still present. So I definitely say the puja pratishta very closely aligns with one called Taranga Rangini, like enjoying the fruits, like prosperity gospel. I'm such a successful devotee, check me out. And they could have actually lost that I should be pleasing Prabhupada. I've become the big center. So, I mean, these things can happen. It's all in those books. So, you're very right. Bhajana Kriya is about performing devotional service under the guidance of the Guru. And if you're not initiated yet, that Guru can be Srila Prabhupada, because he's giving you all the guidance. And of course, other devotees around him as well. And initiation is part of Bhajana Kriya, but it's not that it's the only time you have to be initiated to be able to do it. You just have to be discharging devotional service under the guidance of a devotee, and it's Bhajana. And then, if you do that, which includes offenseless chanting, clearing stage, in due course, all of the muck out of the heart will have gone, and you'll become steady and fixed, and your mind won't be a source of disturbance and flickering anymore. But look, we spent billions of lives getting this messy. So even though the holy name has the potency to clear it all up very quickly, then we also have to look at the quality of our chanting. And if it's taking a lot longer than we should have expected, well, how attentive are we being? How offensive are we being? That's a good sign. Yeah, one of the favorite purports of Prabhupada, somewhere in the 6th chapter of the Gita, he talks about the little sparrow who the ocean stole her eggs. You know this verse? Oh, it's somewhere in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad-gita. Anyway, it's some ancient Puranic tale that somehow the ocean stole the eggs of this little bird. And so the bird took a vow that it would empty the ocean. Right. And so, taking a little bit, putting on the land, taking a little bit. And of course, the ocean is just like, well, feeling really threatened here. But Garuda noticed his little sister bird and decided to help. And all of a sudden, the ocean was not quite so bold anymore and decided to give the eggs back. So Prabhupada actually finishes that purport by saying, God helps those who help themselves. So the thing is, we're not alone. If it was just on the strength of our cages, our power, yeah, we're so tiny. We don't stand a chance. Daivi Hesha Guna Mahi, 7:14. Impossible to overcome material nature. But through Krishna, all things are possible. So that's the thing, when we're calling out to Krishna, it's actually Krishna who does the cleaning, not us. But he cleans proportionate to our sincerity. Srimad Bhagavatam 1:217. Srimvatam Swakata Krishna. No, but that literally says, Srimvatam, based on the eagerness of the chanter, the ear of the chanter, I cleanse with my heart. So Krishna actually is doing the cleaning. It's not actually like we just have to convince him we want it clean. Like if we're sort of saying, Krishna, clean my heart, but just let me check this out for a minute. Then he's getting a mixed message, and I guess he believes what he sees us do, not just what we profess. But if we're genuinely sincere, that we're truly calling out to Krishna, Prabhupada would say you can become Krishna conscious in a moment if you're serious. It may take you many lifetimes to become that serious. But that, you could say then the whole endeavor, including our practice of chanting, is trying to become sufficiently serious that when we call out, Krishna gives us the full response. I'm going to go back to the analogy of the child crying out to the mum. So, mums can tell if it's a genuine cry or just a whinge, you know. And if it's saying, I'm hungry, where's it? They literally tune it out. But when they hear a genuine cry, they're there in a second. Now, Krishna's not dissimilar. He's listening, you know. Does this person mean it? Not convinced. Let them prove their love a little stronger. Let there be a little bit more. Turn up the intensity. Well, sometimes. Well, it can. And especially one of the signs might be that kind of I'm feeling better than others and those kind of things. Taking proud, virtue signaling, these might be the kind of forms of Maya that the mode of goodness can induce. So one becomes proud maybe of one's humanitarian work, or it could still be about, it's still egoic. It still could be about serving one's own agenda. But it's still a more favorable place to reach Krishna. Oh my goodness. No. I mean, it's great. I just didn't realize that much time had gone. Thank you for the chat. Iba Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Arutika Shobha Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Dokine Nitai Jan Bomi Gadadha Dokine Nitai Jan Bomi Gadadha Nikate Advaita Srini Achachatrodharo Nikate Advaita Srini Bosi Ache Gaura Chan Ratno Singho Sane Bosi Ache Gaura Chan Aroti Korena Brahma Adidevo Gane Aroti Korena Brahma Adidevo Nara Adi Adi Gauri Jamaradhulaya Nara Hari Adi Gauri Jamaradhulaya Sanjaya Mukunda Bashu Gosadi Gaya Kiva Sankar Vaje Ganto Vaje Vaje Karutala Mathura Mridanga Baje Paramarasala Shankha Baje Ganta Baje Madhur 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 Baje Shankha Baje Ganta Baje Madhur 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 Baje Shankha Baje Ganta Baje Madhur 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 Baje Baje Ganta Baje শঙ্কা বাজে ঘণ্ট বাজে মধুর মাধুর মধুর বাজে ঘণ্ট বাজে মধুর মাধুর মধুর বাজে মাধুর 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 বাজে নিতাই গৌর হরি বল হরি বল হরি বল হরি বল নিতাই গৌর হরি বল হরি বল হরি বল হরি বল Ibabaho kaute chanda jini vadanayutala Gala dese mano malo Kore jallo malo Kiva Siva Sukha Narada Preme Gado Gado Bhakti Vinoda Deke Gaurara Sampada Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Arutika Subhadaya Janovi Tatovane Jagamana Lobha Gaurange Parutika Sova Jagajana Manalobha Gaurange Arutika Soba Jagajana Manalobha Gaurange Arutik Soba Jagajana Manalobha Gaurange Arutik Soba Jagajana Manalobha Jagajana Manalobha Jagajana Manalobha Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Haribo, Haribo, La Haribo, Gaura Haribo. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Procharine Nirvisesa Shunyabadi Paschatya Sutarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadharu Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadharu Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Sri Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gauranga Jai, Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga Jai, Nitai Gauranga. Jai Sachinandana Gaura Hari. Jai Sachinandana Gaura Hari. Jai Krishna Balaram, Jaya Giri Govardhan. Jai Krishna Balaram, Jai Yogiri Govardhan, Jai Radha Govardhan Hare Radha Govardhan Hare Radhe. Jai Radha Govardhan Hare Radha Govardhan Hare Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Jai Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 La Haribo. Jai Shri Shri Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki, Shri Shri Radha Govardhan Hari Ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram Ki, Giriraj Govardhan Hari Ki, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki, Gaur Premanandi. Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Pralada Lada Daine. Pralada Lada Daine. Hiranyakashipu Vaksaha. Hiranyakashipu Vaksaha. Silatankana Kalaye. Silatankana Kalaye. Ito Nasingha Padato Nasingho. Ito Nasingha Padato Nasingho. Jato Jato Jami Tato Nasingha. Jato Jato Jami Tato Nasingha. Mohi Nrsimha Hridaye Nrsimha. Mohi Nrsimha Hridaye Nrsimha. Narasimham Ading Sharanam Prapade. Narasingam Ading Sharo Nang Prapate. Tava Karakamalabare Nakam Advuta Sringa Dolita Hiranakashipu Tanu Bringam Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare Tava Karakamala Bare Tava Karakamala Bare Nakamadhuta Sringa Dolita Hiranakashipu Tanu Bringam Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare Tava Karakamala Bare Nakamadhuta Sringa Dolita Hiranakashipu Tanu Bringam Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Jaya Nrsimhadev Nrsimhadev Jai Nrsimhadev Jai Nrsimhadev